You're in the rant wormhole where I rant about whatever my patrons of $15 a month or more want me to rant about. You can get a rant by being one of those people. Mr. Tangelo says, rant about books and their intellectual value compared to other mediums or lack thereof. You know, it's weird because there's nothing that books have inherently that other mediums couldn't have on some level. Like, it might not be the same tactile experience. Like, there are certain books that can only exist as books by incorporating the physicality of the book into the reading. But because most books don't do that, I mean, you could say that that's, you know, that is something that books uniquely have in creating their own Gesamtkunstwerk, you know, their own like using the medium as part of the message, like integrating all the elements. But like you know, there's not a ton of books written that way. Most books are like they might have some level of formatting that accounts for the fact that they are in text that is difficult to imitate in another medium. And definitely what works in text is different from what works in other mediums. But like, technically, you can just put text on screen in any of those other mediums and incorporate it. You know, like a game like Nier very famously had a whole part where it just becomes a text novel. You know, it just becomes a book. Or, mega interesting use of text in a game is in Lost Odyssey. I think Last Odyssey. I can never get this right. I think it's Lost Odyssey. In that game, there are these memory segments where they had like a professional writer, you know, like a famous writer, come in and write these sections, but like they set them to like backdrops of imagery that sort of creates the scene being discussed, and then the words themselves are animated in like how they enter the screen in a way that reflects what's being said in the words. It's mega creative and it makes it super emotional, and you know, because there's music and everything, it enhances the quality of the writing, you know, by just adding more to what can be done to represent this story, you know, what can be added onto pure text to make it, you know, well, no longer pure text. But like, do I think that there are stories that wouldn't necessarily even translate well to that presentation? Sure. But like, you can even put a well-written codec inside of a video game, you know, and like, there's little chance that it would be impossible to just put a fully functional novel inside of a video game and have it be a part of it, contributing to its greater whole. Or, you know, you could do that in a movie, potentially. It might not be as interesting. I mean, you could make a visualizer of a book and add on to it. So, like, I'm trying to basically justify, is there anything a book can do that another medium can't do? I don't think the answer is yes, aside from, like, you know, stories that literally utilize the medium. And, like, granted, again, I think every book does utilize its medium when it's being created as a matter of course. But, like, again, like, if you copied that into a game, you could copy the chapter breaks, you could copy everything except for the tactile feeling of literally holding a book, and even then, VR could make that possible. But, like, the only thing, you know, what I'm trying to say is if you convert it to a different medium, you don't have to obey those rules, but you can. But you're way more freed up to consider pacing in different ways than, you know, than just the conventional one of how a book is typically read. So, like, the thing is that, like, in most of those mediums, nobody's really tried to do something that is of the same caliber of thought that a book can have, and I think that's mostly just because of time dedication. Like, it's a lot easier to type out words than it is to, you know, create images. And they're, you know, images of different levels are of different stages of difficulty to create. But like, when you're just working with words, it's like you have all the space in the world, all the time in the world to fill in as much depth or as little depth as you possibly want. And with images, it's like you can pack a lot of information into a single image. But like, if you're trying to tell a story that involves lots of narration, for instance, it's going to bog down the pacing and intrigue of your imagery considerably. And like, that's not to say it's impossible to do something. Like, I think of Homestuck and how well it integrates these two things where, you know, it can have an image and then just pages and pages of either internal monologue or dialogue between characters that doesn't need to be visualized, and then just move to the next page whenever there is something new to visualize. And, you know, maybe do that 12 times in a row if the next 12 panels are all visual, and then, you know, be right back to reading. It's just whatever it needs to be at the time, which is really the most perfect way to create a story, I think, is to figure out what your story is about, and, like, what parameters you'd like to set it within, and then, like, you know, just each moment of the story, figure out what would be the parameters necessary to tell it best. But, like, that's a high level of experimentation. And I don't know by what miracle Homestuck managed to actually, like, get a ton of attention. But, you know, if you're willing to be so bold, maybe you, too, can strike that iron before it goes cold. I don't know why it would. So, do I think that there is, at present, more intellectual content contained in books than in other mediums? Possibly, because I think that way more books are written, way more people have time to write books, who have time to, you know, go on adventures and live a fulfilling life and have something to write about and take their time to craft their words just right and get every idea in there, because it's basically, you know, as fast as you can come up with ideas and write them down is how fast you can write a book. Whereas in any other medium, it's like if you want to try to make something truly crazy and experimental, you're going to have the work ethic of Andrew Hussey. But it's possible. You know, you just got to live, you know, as he put it, Homestuck is a lifestyle, not just a work of art, you know. So you just got to make a lifestyle out of something, and then you can get it done. That's it for that rant.